I think we're super excited to start our learning marathon. With great delight, I would want to welcome Maaret. She brings along around 25 years of experience in the testing world. The audience has to know she was awarded the most influential agile testing professional. She's also one of the Eurostar Testing Excellence awardees. She has spoken in about 28 countries with more than 500 sessions till now. It's a great excitement and privilege to have you with us, Maaret. She also is an empirical technologist. She believes in exploration and also uses it as a technique in her testing. She's an active speaker, author, conference designer, and a community facilitator. She works as a director consulting at CGI. Hi, Maaret. We wish you all the best and a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. So let's see. I'll share my screen and hopefully you have the right thing here in front of me.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Good. It's an early morning and I am very much a night owl. I love the energizing activity in the beginning, kind of waking up and realizing that there's so many things going on in the world. And what we're really spending this next session on is there's so many things going on in the world of testing right now. We'll talk about sociotechnical guardrails, fancy word in many ways, but social meaning social things that people do, technical meaning some of our insights get to be implemented in all of the different tools and the practices that we end up employing. And the guardrails meaning we need to figure out how to walk a kind of a tightrope with lots of options, lots of things going on all the time, and lots of lovely changes coming our way. I come to you today from the perspective of kind of like a practitioner in many ways. I'm a practitioner in the sense that I got to start working with some of these AI-related things with somebody else's money a few years back while I was working at F-Secure still. We set up I think it was 2.6 million euros learning program called research. That's what most of the research in early technologies is. You get to try things out. You need to figure out use cases. You get to see if it works. And then when things fail, that's what the idea of experimentation is. You learn sometimes by failing, sometimes by succeeding. When things fail, you write reports so that other people can share that. So learning, research, experience sharing mindset is kind of the background that I come to all of this in. So with that learning mindset, when these large language models and generating code and generating text was kind of taking off and GitHub Copilot came into the picture, I got a chance of kind of like getting myself into the queues quite early. And since I happened to volunteer with a lot of community activities, when asked for reasons why they should give you a access early on into any of these tools, usually the activity, the volunteering in the community is kind of like a +1. You go one step above some of the others in the queues. So I got a fairly early access to a license of a GitHub Copilot. My first uses actually after 1 week of having it in my hands was that I went into a job interview with it. It was a pair programming interview. I was considering changing jobs back then. In a pair programming interview, when I was using GitHub Copilot in that interview, I ended up actually just showing in the moment that when my pair didn't actually pair with me, because what he actually wanted to do was assess me because he was interviewing me. It's kind of nice when you have a pair who is, actually collaborating with you, actually giving you some of the things that you can't remember in the moment. Because again, interview situations are a little bit nervous, but also in that case, I learned that whenever I'm using something like this, some of the creativity, kind of like the external imagination, the idea that you always want to one-up whatever you're getting, whether it's your peer, whether it's your, AI assistant, figuring out the bugs and the things that people would miss in general. It actually came out a really good job interview. I did get offered that job. I didn't change into that company because, again, for me, pairing, it's almost like a sacred ritual, and it's not meant for assessing other people. So you don't call it pair programming if you're not planning on collaborating. So a lot of the stuff around collaboration is kind of big part of the way that I look at the world as a practitioner. So a little later, we then got the ChatGPT, and obviously, again, you had to be there, on the first days. One of the sessions I ran on the first couple of weeks of having ChatGPT available to me was to have people come together in a group. I had a testing group called Testing Dozen. We were learning testing together, and I was thinking, like, it's a great testing target. We're gonna, play with that. We're gonna figure out if it works, and we'll model it a little bit, kind of like, create a lovely mind map where you can see kind of what did we learn and what did we do, and maybe, maybe we could generate some of the ideas of what we can try still later on. And I realized that it was actually a lot bigger step for people to go from having tested deterministic functionalities, basically things that always give you the same result, kind of figuring out the steps and the things that you would do in a user interface, or the exact values that you would send in an API, and going into this ChatGPT world where small changes in the input could have a major impact on the output, and even the same input wouldn't always give you the same results. So kind of like these probabilistic things. People had hard time testing those, and we had a really great session with 12 people figuring out how would our heads need to transfer a little bit into a different position so that we can get these into use. But from those first weeks on, it's pretty much been a tool of learning to use, learning to apply, and remembering to open. And again, sometimes I have this hate-love relationship with these tools, in the sense that I ask things not because I intend them to be useful to me in that moment, but I ask them because I intend them to be inspiring, like an external imagination, and most of the time also then bring out the best in me. So some of my best work actually comes from this idea of one up, like always climb the ladder collaboratively, go one step higher, and figure out if there's something new to learn. Every day is a learning opportunity, and if we have that mindset where we're continuously learning, that 1%, 4 minutes out of our 8-hour working day, 1% there, if that accumulates over time, that will make us like 38 times ourselves in 1 year. And I'm happy just, doubling up every single year. So figuring out how to combine things, how to be inspired by all of the things that we have going around in the world, definitely a big thing for me. So later on, coming my way also was things like Codium AI, integrating this into the Selenium project where I'm volunteering, integrating that into the code base there, kind of watching people treat it as if it was a kind of like a party in the code review comments, a party that you kind of ignore most of the time, but then when it once even says something smart and useful and finds something that other people don't notice, you kind of feel the buzz that it generates for a moment, and then again it goes into this kind of like an active participant that you read, you don't pay too much attention to, it doesn't generate you the same kind of intense feeling of having to pay attention to everything that it says, and take care of the human feelings that are around real humans, but kind of treat it as someone who's just giving you some hints, sometimes useful, sometimes not, but it's giving you the chance of learning and getting some of these insights. And then finally, on my journey on practitioner, I joined a new job in June. I was put in a very much a corporate constraint setting. I can't and I'm not allowed to use all of the different tools on my work computer. So kind of like having multiple computers really amped up the amount of money I need to put in order to play with these kind of tools. So it's no longer enough for me to just pay for licenses. I am not just allowed to use all of them on this particular computer, which is my work computer, but I am allowed to use Microsoft Copilot. And in the last 2 weeks in my organization, we've been rolling out in a more major way also the GitHub Copilot. So getting back to that on my coding assistants. It's kind of like a welcome thing. But figuring out things around contracts and when would you go about and using one of these tools, kind of like the idea of a corporation trusting another corporation because you can create a contract with them, whereas an individual, me alone, Maaret, just by myself. The contract with me and Microsoft, I wouldn't trust that it wouldn't be changing so much with kind of one-sided agreements. So corporation to corporation contracts, realizing how that goes, and then realizing that you have a lot more things that you can input. So definitely a practitioner. And the difference between a practitioner and a builder generally is that you would use tools. I have used a lot more tools than what I chose to kind of like show you on my little timeline here. And would be happy to talk about those. But today I wanted to kind of look into just a few of these. Let me just click on this. So one of the things I learned over the years out of working with test automation and getting started with things on that side was that we need to be very aware of the time that we're using. Test automation, AI, is kind of like just an extension to many of the ideas on what things we're trying to automate within testing. So to me, I could, easily take up some space and explain all the different things that can go wrong with AI. But I've made a deliberate choice, just like I needed to make a deliberate choice around test automation 10, 12, 15 years ago, that instead of using time on warning about things and listing all the downsides, which we testers do know how to do, we are really, really good at that. We need to sometimes also realize that we are stepping back on the use of our time into a situation where we choose to use the same amount that we would choose to use on explaining to a manager why test automation 100% probably isn't a great idea. We can add that 1% more or even promille, like a smaller portion, into the success of our automation, into the success of our AI tools, and into the practical empirical experiences of figuring out where this is useful. So this is really the mindset from which I come into this topic. I don't know why it's not letting me click on here. Okay, but the things we talk about. So setting some expectations. I'll show you, well, I didn't want to go into demoing, so I took some screenshots. I'm showing you kind of 3 demos or 3 screenshots of things that I've done, so doing oriented things. And then I'll sum up with talking about the Sociotechnical guardrails. So we'll start with Copilot. And Copilot, I hope you have, at least some of you, already had chances of enjoying this, but giving you kind of like a brief overview of what Copilot is about and what that pairing experience was about. So going into use of Copilot, you would have your IDE, your integrated development environment, where you would probably be writing your test automation scripts. You might be writing your book. I have been using it for that purpose as well. Or you might be writing your day-to-day notes. And no matter what you write, it's kind of like, guessing ahead what you want to say. Over the couple of years of using this, it used to guess a lot more. Now it's kind of giving me a little bit more space of first saying what I want to say. Clearly, someone has been tuning it a little bit, and different days, depending on what version of the product you have at your hands, you might be getting an entirely different version or experience than what I had on the time when I was taking these screenshots. So it's basically guessing ahead. It's having the power to accept. So if you tab into this, then you get the thing accepted. And if you wanted to say something other than integer to Roman, then probably you won't be accepting whatever it's now guessing for you. The reason why this is guessing Roman, so you can kind of like maybe look at the context there, the context of the file name that I have already given. So my project is called New Important Project, and my file name is called roman.py. So again, kind of like guessing that maybe I'm doing something with Roman numerals is kind of a safe one. So at some point I also learned to call these important and just testing out what kind of things it then generates for me. I usually don't start with naming myself in the beginning of the project, but guessing I had a lot of fun collecting different names that it remembers to suggest to me. Nowadays, this particular thing no longer happens. You have to wait a little longer before you get it to guess names, but you can't anymore get it to guess it in an entirely empty file. But just kind of guessing who I am, there's probably safer guesses than this. But, with some kind of a probabilistic algorithm, it seems like, somebody didn't make it so that the most probable person would be me in this case. And that's, again, a feature to add later on. So all of these things are pending to change. We're probably learning and we're probably improving any of these tools that we use. So getting into the actual writing of code and tests, you kind of need to get started. You could start with a comment. You could start with the file name. You could start with just whatever syntax structures you need for the particular language, and you can very quickly get it to either guess for you, or when you have already inputted something, you can ask it to guess or give you some alternatives. So in this particular case, when I was asking for solutions for Roman numerals or looking for those, getting 10 different possible solutions, it took me a little bit of time to actually get to a situation where I had other files on my computer that I had recently used, where I would get it to guess the worst solution that it can give me as the first one that I'm seeing, so that I can take a lovely screenshot. So again, a lot of this kind of like, prompt engineering, now not for the positive effects, but more for the getting the perfect screenshot that I want to share with you today. So just, reviewing this particular piece of code, you can already kind of say that most likely this is not the implementation you would want for a Roman numeral converter. Even if you weren't a programmer, realizing the fact that, having an if statement for every single number separately, like you can reason that it's probably not an algorithm that is very efficient. It might be very effective, like it only does, whatever you have, every single line is every single case is separate. And I love this particular example because it reminds me of the 14-year-old myself that started programming, and this was the code that I wrote. So again, an average person with examples have had an impact on whatever all of these tools end up generating for us. And then on top of that, we're doing some filtering, leaving some of the things out. So you can choose whichever you choose. I would not choose the one that it gave me after, a lot of tweaking to get to exactly that worst scenario. I might choose something like this. It already looks better to me, at least, like looking at it quickly. But again, I have multiple different options that I can choose from. And if I don't like the one that I ended up with, because again, my focus is really not on generating the application code. My focus is always on the tests. So I'm playing with the tests more. If I don't like it based on the tests that I'm then doing, like these are, great testing targets for me, then I can always generate a different one, or I could even go and write the different one myself. So, figuring out that for review purposes, you can choose something, you can go back and make changes on things. But the mindset is really about testing. That's kind of where I got with these tools. So on the testing side, it definitely does generate the tests for you as well. But when it generates the tests for you, it generates you tests that you would not really want to have around. So none of these tests that I took on my screen are actually generated. These are all handwritten by me, because the ones that got generated at first were ones where you have a single test case and then you have many, many, many asserts in that. So it wasn't a parameterized test. It was a single test where when the first assert fails, the rest of it won't get run. And what I actually want is a listing and results which tries all of the different combinations that I had, and then gives me a listing of this is wrong, this is right, because usually most of them are right. So I want more granular feedback. So again, I need to know this stuff. I can't just rely on whatever gets generated, but I need to know what I'm looking for. So what would a good programmatic test look like? Similarly, I might not want to, even generate these example-based tests. There's a library here in the example called approval tests, which it didn't definitely generate for me. So I wanted to kind of do a bit more like exploratory testing. Just show me all the different outputs. Let me look at them. Let me decide if I like them. And then let me approve that this is now the golden master, that all the future things will get compared against. So again, getting those ideas, having that mindset of I know what I'm looking for, having that intent in mind, the exploratory mindset is really, really important when you're assessing things that you have from these generative tools. So all of this thing with GitHub Copilot, I definitely want to use it. A lot of the teaching sessions that I use, it saves up time in kind of doing some of the autocomplete. It helps in many ways, but I can get also the same kind of things from, going into a ChatGPT window and copy pasting from there. Or I can get the same kind of things going into Microsoft Copilot and copy pasting from there. But what I really, really like, and what my colleagues in my previous team also mentioned that they liked, is this idea that the extra auto-completion that you get with something like GitHub Copilot, the integration aspect of it, it's like as if you have Code Google in your fingertips. So you don't have to write this kind of basic boilerplate, but at the same time, it generates you some of the boilerplate you don't want. So you need to be very intentional to not just accept whatever it's giving you, but continuously review the structures that you want to be going for. And the more examples we have of good things, so that the average becomes something good, I believe that over time, this is getting more and more helpful, even though sometimes nowadays I still feel like this is more of a, like an inspiration of, I hate this, I want to do better. So again, approaching it with the right kind of mindset, that's what I talk about when I talk about guardrails. The mindset of one-upping whatever you're getting, whatever you're seeing, always striving for that 1% better is a really, really important one to go from. So having to go to Stack Overflow, would definitely be something that I have also done a lot in my career. Not having to do that also then means that we're changing a little bit the world around us. So probably people won't be writing the good teaching samples to Stack Overflow if people are not using those there. So being aware also of the side impacts of this kind of changes in the world. So I definitely love programmatic testing, generating tests on unit level, generating tests well, I do a lot of Python and Playwright. I do a lot of TypeScript and Playwright. I do a lot of Python and Selenium. I do some Cypress. I do a lot of API related work. I do a lot of robot framework. So kind of like ending up with multiple languages and not always even remembering what the syntax looks like. It's really helpful in that case. But the programmatic test kind of like, leaving documentation behind the thinking there is very much the thing that I need to do. But I also do things where I don't work with programmatic tests. I spend time exploring applications. And for exploring applications, I usually don't find GitHub Copilot the tool of choice for me, but it's more of this mindset of doing generative AI pair testing with very general purpose LLMs, large language models. So things like, having the habit of always having it open in one of my windows, and kind of like thinking of it as if it was the rubber duck that actually answers to me. And sometimes it just energizes me on how stupid answers it might be giving to me. And sometimes, when it's some of my colleagues who use these kind of tools and they send over to me like a ready proposal generated by one of these tools and say, we can start, building it from here. I'm like, okay, so again, one up, I want to do better than what's in this particular paper. And on June, when I started my new job, one of the things that I got actually really positive feedback on was on a particular proposal for a customer on a testing project where someone else had asked for the proposal from a generative AI, then send it over to me, and I just had to rewrite it because it wasn't good enough. So again, sometimes even it's not giving me what I want. It's just a positive thing. Actually, most of the time, it's just a positive thing. But you get into the habit of figuring out when is it useful to you, when is it not useful to you. And when you have a habit of kind of like you don't know if it's good yet, if you maybe, you get an answer, but you don't have the knowledge of assessing whether you like it or not, maybe that's a great way of, finding a real person and having also this kind of a pair testing or pair conversation, bringing that social aspect to your learning and your work, so that you're not just rubber ducking with the generative AI, but you're bringing humans into that loop as well. Some good use cases for pair testing for me has been, at least for searching of boundaries. I'm arguing about certain assumptions, just thinking in terms of this is my assumption, what else could I assume. So again, breaking down your thinking and then having a conversation about whatever you're thinking, like the steps or thoughts that you have, or your options, feeding those into one of these tools, you get a lot better understanding when you don't think it just knows for you, because it's actually not a knowledge base, it's an average base. It's giving the averages of things that it has seen in these kind of settings. So if you recognize insufficiency and you're motivated by fixing it, definitely that's a good way of doing things. Having that freedom of criticizing and saying you don't like what it says, like the amount of energy that I sometimes use on trying to not be the blunt, human, thin type of a person that I am, especially with my American colleagues saying that your text, well, yesterday I ended up saying this, your text looks like it was generated by generative AI. Did you? And then learning that no, it wasn't. And I actually offended the person, not really intentional, not really what I meant to do, but also kind of like figuring out that maybe, there's certain kind of core elements and insights that I was picking up from the material that weren't quite the mainstream that you would expect. But not having to use that energy of filtering and making sure that you're always remembering that it's a human that might have feelings on the other side. Sometimes it's been very liberating to me. And also, you dare to ask things that you wouldn't dare to ask from a colleague. I nowadays do dare to ask things from my colleagues, and I do encourage you to dare to ask things from your colleagues. So kind of like a good, again, a guardrail in this sense is this idea that if you notice that all of your social contacts are artificial and fake, maybe you do need to intentionally go and balance those things and see real humans and talk about the insights that you have acquired in the recent times. Any learning experiences you have make a great conversation starter with real humans, and you'll probably take a lot out of those conversations as well. So it's just a kind of like a continuous building on top of whatever you were doing before. And well, since you are still with the human in the loop type of thing, you don't have to obey your pair. You don't have to do whatever the pair was saying to you. You can just kind of like, do some of the corrections. It was saying, don't do this, and you'll absolutely not obey that instruction. You'll do the exact opposite, or you figure out, whatever the approach is that you want for the particular case that you're at. But building that habit of having these little conversations, I've noticed that in the organization that I work in right now, we had for everyone last year, we had the goal of building that habit, trying to use these tools. And still in my team of about 10 people, I've had 2 people who hadn't actually managed, even with the goal connected to our work, hadn't managed to build that habit and practice. And there was a lot more from that conversation of what the more time spending habit builders had built that then enabled the others to take things forward. So again, you do something with the Gen AI pair, and then you take it to your human pairs and share those advices and ideas of what kind of things others have tried. I do not want to generate test cases in general, but I have noticed, because I always go and ask for things that I might or might not use from this kind of tools, I've noticed that while I might have a lot of experience in exploratory testing, and I might have, my ways of figuring out all the different perspectives that I want to do, it's a great coaching mechanism for more newer exploratory testers to say that you go and you explain all the things you know in writing, and then you copy paste that into a prompt. And you request, you could request test cases, but that's too much text to read for my taste. And I definitely don't want to read extra text. I want kind of like condensed information rather than any extra text, especially generated one. I don't want to spend the rest of my life reading text that was average and shouldn't be actually even paid attention or read by humans. So I rather usually generate charters or top 10 lists or something more concise. And having noticed that again, the one-upping attitude with colleagues, sometimes some of the colleagues are actually doing better as well when encouraged to use these kind of tools. And for me, kind of noticing the kind of coverage differences, what's in my notes, what's in these kind of notes, a good way of reflecting what I would want to do. There's an article on my blog on how badly we generally test logins. Like there's so much more than just logging in either from a web application or a mobile application, or security of passwords. There's so much more that we can test, including the fact that somebody usually builds all kinds of authentication and authorization systems, which are kind of tied into this login, also including the logout, so that you no longer have access to, and you might actually want to pay attention to those. And again, the average text generated out of one of these tools really didn't give me as versatile choices as I have learned to generate, having been an exploratory tester for almost 3 decades. So keep being excited about, looking at the applications, looking at the different kind of problems that we're finding, and learn and learn and learn once and once again. So definitely these are helpful and save some time. But on generating test cases as such, I wouldn't want to leave them behind because, well, the previous project where I didn't have generated test cases, but I had handwritten test cases, I had 2,500 of them, and I counted that it would have taken me it was 11 full working days if I was reading them fairly quickly through. I think it was 1 minute per test case, which was much less than I would need in order to understand those. So kind of like the time used on reading, especially generated text, it's not going to save us time. Writing less and more concise, that's going to save us time because things get written once, but it gets read hopefully hundreds or thousands of times. So that's a mindset that we need to keep in mind whenever we're generating test cases and other texts. So only generate things worth reading. Or if it's evidence out of your testing, which some of my customers also are asking from me, that's not intended for reading. We already kind of mark it so that we no longer will look at it after we've once used it. So some of the standards require us to use something of that sort where we need to leave behind evidence. But I have a general preference of recording what I did over writing then in those kind of cases. And again, it doesn't have to be all of it. And it's good to remember that these are really text generation tools, all of these large language models. So they are useful usually for recalling things out of something that someone in the world has ever written, kind of like probabilistic style. So these kind of problems where you are trying to make it count things or do math for you. Well, you have programming languages that do this kind of stuff a lot better. So know your tools is kind of my advice. Then the third example that I had for you is on the idea of RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. And just building on top of what we had just there before, you can just use RAG as kind of like an idea of inputting larger context. So for example, for me, I have written an exploratory testing courseware, and I get a lot better advice and a lot better, like at least better advice that I would expect to get when I prime it with materials that I have created, which means I also like them. There's the bias of thinking that something that you have spent time on is already useful, but getting the very different kind of answers. So you can definitely feed more input, and you can have an entire database of inputs. So playing with this concept of RAG, you can also do it for little automation related tasks, like the idea of collecting information from your previous test runs so that you can fix your locators. I don't think this is something that I would want to use in real projects. I believe that auto-correcting things have a bit too much of a risk of breaking things, and I have better options like talking to the actual developers on fixing my locators or moving the maintenance over to the developers. There's so many better ways in a systemic scale to fix locators than applying RAG into those. And I have some people obviously asking me things like we have thousands and thousands of test cases, 50% of them are failing. Could we use this to just somehow magically get them to pass? But there's always a reason for failing, and you are not looking for a way of making them pass without understanding the systemic causes of those kind of things. So a lot of different words, the decision models, the generative language of image generating models, the things where we feed in context, and the things where we agentically split our work into smaller pieces so that we can have multiple queries into the model that then builds up the thing that the user will see. All of this is kind of the practical stuff. So to sum up on the social technical guardrails, you can do a lot of good things with these tools already. But there's one thing that you absolutely need to be aware of before you go and play. Like one major guardrail that will keep you safe. And that is the guardrail of remembering that whatever you are writing there, you are handing it over to someone else. So all the files you're copy pasting there, all the context you're sharing, it goes into somebody else's database. And I, at least, while from corporation to corporation, I do trust the contracts that we're making. From an individual to corporation, I am very much aware of what's secret, what's confidential, and what do I want to keep confidential. And this knowledge of you take whatever tool with AI, it's going to be sending over some things over the network. Usually, or at least you have to look into what it's sending, that your data is maybe being moved somewhere. A definite awareness thing before you use any of these tools. So customer projects are a no-no unless you have made, again, organization to organization agreements on how that data is handled. On the other guardrails, we already talked about this kind of idea of, splitting the tasks, figuring out what you're trying to do, and kind of like breaking it down into the smaller tasks, subtasks that you have. If you're thinking actively while you're using these tools and kind of continuously go into smaller things, you get a lot better results. So it might be you're asking to fix some of the locators. It might be a specific feature that you're asking at rather than the entire system. So kind of that drilling in and the mindset of this is this next step that I need help with. Really helpful guardrail in many ways. Figuring out what you want to leave behind in automation and using automation as a way of documenting. Absolutely loving that style of working. And the right time and awareness of time in general. And sometimes realizing that, you're getting not what you wanted, but the rejection in experimentation is also, it's a learning experience. And it gives you, well, not the blind faith, but this kind of like an idea of going forward. And moving to kind of this instead of generating all the test cases that you currently write, maybe you could learn to write more concise test documentation rather than generating that. That's my thinking of improve first ideas. Then there's certain kind of boundary seeking guardrails, knowing that every single tool has a monthly fee. Every single tool has a limit of how much you can use it. And there are just other tools than these per use type of tools that solve the same problems. Being aware of that is good. Realizing that the world around you changes due to these and maybe compensating for, figuring out what you consider ethical and good future, even when these tools are around, is something to realize. And that's just then paying attention to the fact that there is a technical implementation and architecture behind all of these. So to kind of sum it up all, know where you are, measure, assess where you are right now, and be critical about, is this useful? Is it saving time? Sometimes I don't think I'm saved time. I think I'm inspired to do better than I would do without these tools. Experiment together with your colleagues, with your customers, figure out what works, package that into some kind of tools and reusable pieces. So learn first, package then. Learn to habitually apply all these kind of tools available to you. Share whatever you learned. And if you learned something that is unique, maybe share it in a reusable format. That's how I think we'll solve all of these puzzles. That's what I had in mind for today. Handing it back to you.
Awesome, Maaret. Thank you for very granular and very apt slides and for explaining it so well. We have a couple of questions which I can take in the interest of time. I think we have one of the persons who's interested in contributing in the QA perspective for AI products on pair testing. Would you suggest any particular roadmap for it?
Contributing to products, well, there's a lot of open source ones. So you could find one of the open source projects. One of the ones that I looked most recently is one called Aluminum. So Selenium and AI combined together into something new. So again, it's a Selenium-based tool. So Selenium is definitely still an inspiration to many. So that might be one. But I would say there's thousands of tools. I've looked at hundreds. There's thousands of tools. Find someone who you feel like you'd be excited to spend time on and volunteer there. Any communities pretty much are good for that.
Thank you. Also, another question, if we use GitHub Copilot with a private repository for code generation, maybe on a client project, they're asking if we can be assured that the generated code and application details will remain secure and they won't be shared over the network, given that we are using a private repository.
Yeah, this is kind of a trust question. So would I personally, Maaret, not a corporate entity, would I trust someone who has just stolen open source code and removed attribution? I wouldn't. But would my corporation make a contract with the other corporation so that there's, relevant compensations if this trust is ever broken? I definitely would. So the perspective from an individual and corporation will look different. If it is absolutely secret and you want to keep it secret, I would not share it to another party. That's how it is.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maaret. Thank you for the clear, in detail topic that you brought us with in the morning. And thank you so much for joining in early and staying with us. We're so happy to have you. A quick thank you note from the entire community to you for always being enthusiastic and joining our keynotes. Thanks, Maaret.
Thank you.